Hi, and welcome back to Mingus on Tech. I'm Ken Mingus, Executive Editor at Computer World. I'm here with Senior Writer Lucas Mirian. We're going to be talking about tablets and two-in-ones and hybrids and why companies seem to be rushing for them right now. And we're back. So when I say rushing for them, what's interesting, Lucas, is some information that you've come across from, it was a Forrester research?
Yeah, both Forrester and IDC.
Okay. That at a time when, tablets and two-in-ones, at least in the consumer market, that sales seem to be falling off. I mean, they're still selling, but, Apple didn't sell as many this year as it did last year, didn't sell as many last year as the year before. And with Microsoft, with the Surface Pro 4 and a lot of the Surface Pro line, it's interesting that companies seem to be doing the opposite. That what Forrester and IDC are finding is that there's this trend in the workplace that companies are moving more toward hybrid laptops/tablets. And so I just wanted to find out a little bit more about what the hell's going on. What do companies know that regular buyers don't?
Versatility.
Okay.
It's about as simple as that from what the data is saying. Is basically unlike a tablet, which only has one use case, for a convertible or a two-in-one, you can use it both as a laptop and a tablet for traveling purposes. Right. So I think it's about as simple as that. In consumer use, at the same time, the interesting thing is that as the smartphones get larger, they're actually eating the lunch of the tablets. So they're biting into the tablets' growth. So tablets are declining among consumers.
Okay.
They're also declining, as you noted, among businesses because they're not as versatile, and as the phone screens get larger. One of the things that Forrester noted is that the iPad is going to have a lot to do. The new iPad Pro is going to have a lot to do with the growth in two-in-ones.
We like our new iPad Pro. Yeah,
it's a beauty.
Yep.
And as well as Dell. Dell is also saying that their two-in-one. They've actually taken the focus off of tablets and put their resources into building out new two-in-ones.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the rise of the smartphone, because I've got my my big iPhone 7 Plus, and when you've got that obviously cut into the iPad Mini, which I think is pretty much on its way out the door. Apple may have already canceled it or may have already stopped updating it, but it is interesting too that Apple, of course, is coming at this with you get a tablet and then you buy the keyboard to make it the sort of two-in-one.
Right.
Whereas the Surface is really sort of designed to be a two-in-one to begin with, and you can make it a tablet if you want to disconnect it and use it, in a more portable fashion. Yeah. At the same time, you've got a lot of activity around mobile apps. Yeah. When you think about all the stuff that Apple's been doing with I think IBM and Cisco and others that make them more useful for enterprise purposes.
Yeah. And as I noted in an earlier story, enterprises are also increasing their adoption of custom applications for business purposes. So they're actually coding their own applications, their business applications, whether it's for sales or for inter-office communications, collaboration, that sort of thing. They're tailoring them for their businesses.
Right.
And it's fairly easy to do these days because you can go out to open source libraries and just get the chunks of code that you need to put something together.
And build your own custom apps.
Build your own custom apps, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's been this long-running debate ever since the iPad Pro came out 2 years ago, that can a tablet replace your laptop? And I've seen some interesting columns over the last couple of months, I guess, talking about can a laptop replace your tablet? Because a lot of it really does depend on the perspective you've got. I mean, let's say you're really into multi-touch and what you need to do is, you want to be able to touch the screen. If you're using a MacBook, forget it. That's not going to happen. And so the idea of turning it around and saying, okay, if you're used to, the apps and the iOS ecosystem that you use on an iPad Pro or the iPhone, and then you were to suddenly hand it a laptop, it might not necessarily do what you want it to do because you're used to the tablet now. Right. It's interesting too because just anecdotal story here. Alex, my partner, is now moving to an iPad Pro keyboard combo, and over the weekend, and he's using it and loves it. It's a great laptop replacement for him. And he asked me, he's like, I need to scan some photos from this to the wireless printer. And I'm thinking, okay, go to the App Store and see if you can find an app. He actually went to the App Store. Epson had put out an app that allowed for wireless scanning, and the next thing I knew, he was scanning photos from his iPad to the wireless printer. Now that may, okay, maybe I'm an old guy, and this sounds like, golly gee whiz, what can you do now? But that was one little problem that a year or two ago might have stopped someone from moving from a laptop to a tablet or a 2-in-1 hybrid. Another problem removed, and I think that's happening more and more.
Yeah, and I personally, I've always felt this way. I like a physical keyboard.
Yeah,
I love the ability to actually touch keys in order to type. I grew up, I had typing classes when I was younger, and I'm older. I'm not a millennial or even a Generation Xer, but I still think that a lot of people like that physical touch of a keyboard. They like the feeling that they're actually touching keys and they're not, picking out virtual keys on a screen.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the appeal of it. I love laptops. I don't have a 2-in-1, but that's something I would definitely be willing to try as long as the screen was large enough, and the iPad Pro and the new Dells are large enough.
Well, yeah, you had dug up some information that Dell, I thought was very interesting, that Dell had said earlier this month that its 2-in-1 laptop sales had surged 48%.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's consumer, probably not, but it's almost guaranteed to be a lot of enterprise buyers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's, I would say, definitely being driven by businesses.
So what we've got here is really a collection of things that are all happening at once. You've got certainly the hardware is more than powerful enough to do what most people need to do on a laptop.
Right.
You've got larger screens, the big Surface, the Surface Pro, or the iPad Pro with either the 12.9-inch screen or the 10.5-inch screen. You've got a concerted effort on Apple's part to move into the enterprise by working with enterprise companies to come up with mobile apps. Yeah. You've got companies who are building their own apps, using the snippets of code you talk about. And then you've got Microsoft, which is obviously already in the enterprise, pushing it took them a while, because the whole hybrid 2-in-1 thing, at first, Microsoft really looked like they might not get out the gate, but they kept at it and kept putting out the kind of hardware that other companies could mimic, and have managed to sort of ease their way into something that everybody thought Apple owned the whole tablet market.
Right. Right. Yeah, I just want to point this out because this comes from IDC. We were talking about the Forrester data that was released last week. This is a Q1 report that was released in April, and it says that tablets are seeing a decline in business adoption. Slate tablets are expected to see a decrease of a negative 6.5% combined annual growth rate, and notebooks and mobile workstations will only increase by 0.7% all the way through 2021. At the same time, over the next 4 years, detachables are expected to grow at 21.2% every year.
That's your stats right there.
Yeah.
Basically, everything else is sort of flat or declining a little bit.
Yep.
2-in-1s are taking off. Companies have obviously recognized the value. And, of course, when you think about the cost, too, I mean, you can get an iPad Pro and a keyboard for at least the price of an entry-level MacBook or MacBook Pro. And, in terms of hardware longevity, these things, there's not a lot of moving parts, so they last a long time.
Right. And what you need them for business purposes. If you're going to be doing something with, if you're an artist and you're doing graphics design or something, you can do that on your workstation more than you would on a tablet or a 2-in-1 device. So these are, they're for basic business purposes, for communications and email or spreadsheets or that sort of thing. You're not going to need them as much for the more sophisticated use cases. So you don't need as much power.
Right, we've gotten to the point where we have more than enough. It's interesting you talk about graphics design because April Montgomery here, who runs our graphics design art department, just bought an iPad Pro with the keyboard and is planning to use that for her work. Now, which is not a surprise because it's graphics design. Yeah. But you're right. So all right, so that's the trend. Businesses have jumped on board finally. Consumers are using them and hanging on to them for a long time, and it's very obvious that coming soon to, a desk near you, your next company computer is likely to be a 2-in-1 or a flat-out tablet.
There you go.
All right. Lucas, thanks for the insights. I appreciate it. For now, that's a wrap.